Welcome to The Artist Matters. I'm Alex Rudy. Each episode features an artist sharing their creative journey, their origins, what inspires them, their process, and offering up a little inspiration, motivation, and advice to help you on your creative journey. Whether you're doing it for fun or looking to make a living, this show will help you on your journey and let the world know your art matters. Hey, it's been 2 weeks, so you know it's time for a new episode of The Artist Matters, and I'm your host, Alex Rudy. Welcome back. We're rounding out the month of June, and the pandemic is still going on. We were originally going to go back to Busch Gardens this weekend, but since there's been a spike of cases of COVID in Florida, we're going to hold back. We waited this long. We can wait a little while longer. I think maybe we should have waited to open up stuff and should have pushed it till July. That's just my opinion. I think they did things a little too soon. But I'm okay. Some of my guests are starting to get into gear. I think the CoverGirl band is about to do a live gig, and acting teacher Lori is going to be doing classes with protective face gear on, so you can still see the actor's face. It's good. It's nice to see everybody's keeping busy. I'm still doing my Ramble on the Bridge during the week. Still writing my TV pilot Reset, and I'm making my July movie list, and I'll probably attach it to this when July begins, which is just in a few days, because it still seems as of now that the summer movie season, as far as going to movie theaters, is not going to happen this year. So I'll hunker down, see some of your old favorites. I rewatched Back to the Future recently, Raiders of the Lost Ark, so I was feeling some nostalgia and revisiting some of my favorite summer movies. I know it really stinks. I wanted to spend Father's Day with my dad, but couldn't. He just felt leery about going outside and go to any restaurant during this, which I get. I just want this thing to be over with. It's starting to interfere with some of my vacation plans and family coming from New York to visit us. It's going to be a little challenging, but I think things are finally working out for them to come down here, so I'm looking forward to that. All right. Well, I'm also looking forward to today's guest. This time, we have a different guest to thank for today's guest. This time, we can thank previous guest, author Robert Ottone. He was a guest back in Halloween and released his anthology, People. And Spooky House Press is his publishing company. And he found a new author who's releasing an anthology later, hopefully in July. So this will give you a little preview of who he is. And you can check out his work when it is supposedly tentatively released towards the end of July. And the name of this author-writer is Michael Jess Alexander. Originally from Utah, he's always had a fascination with the horror genre. From seeing scary movies as a young boy and reading novels with some of his favorite titles, including the Goosebumps series and the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark series. And he didn't get any notions of writing until he was in high school, did some short stories, and then was majoring in the visual arts, but then leaned more towards English and ended up becoming an English teacher. He wrote a little bit as the years went by, but it wasn't until the last 2 years that he was getting the itch and was starting to write some short stories that got published. And then he compiled a few and decided to create an anthology, which is called Boarded Windows, Dead Leaves. a collection of 9 short stories, which I actually read. I was lucky enough to get an advance copy and read it before I actually interviewed him. First time that's happened, so it really helped the interview now that I was familiar with his work and was able to ask him questions about it. And it's a really good collection. His writing is very imaginative and he creates great pictures with his words. He offers up some interesting tales that involve zombies, werewolves, vampires, and many more things. And I asked him about his process and how he came to meet Rob Ottone and hook up with Spooky House Press to help release his book. It's nice to be chatting with a writer once again, and I'm sure you'll get a lot out of this. So without further ado, sit back, enjoy, and listen to my chat with Michael Jess Alexander. All right, let's welcome to the show, Michael Jess Alexander. Hello. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome. Love that last name.
I wonder why.
Yeah. And he does sound like an author. Michael Jess Alexander. I like that. It's meant to be, I guess, right?
Well, I figured I ought to include the Jess because there's got to be who knows how many Michael Alexanders in the world. So, yeah.
Well done. All right, let's begin at the beginning. What was it like growing up in Utah?
Oh, well, it was good. Small town Utah. Let's see, I was born and lived the first part of my childhood in Price, Utah, and that's a small town in eastern central Utah. Growing up in the late 80s, 90s, small town, American West, spent a lot of time, reading and watching scary movies. I mean, that's, two of the big activities.
Was it reading first or movies first that got you into the horror genre? Or was it a combination of both?
I would say it's a combination. I would say it was a combination. Mm. Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint one or the other. I can think back to really, really early experiences where I was exposed to either.
Mm-hmm. How young do you remember?
Oh boy. Now that I think about it, it probably was scary movies that really were the initial exposure. But third grade in particular was, a very, very formative year for me. That's when I really, really got into reading. And, I want to say around the same time I had really become, a definite fan of horror movies as well. But when I was when I was a small child, I was pretty much raised by a single parent, my mother. That was up until 7th grade or so, and that's when my mom remarried. But up until that point, it was pretty much just me, my younger brother, he's 2 years younger, and my mother. And, I suspect that this is a pretty common experience with single-parent households. But there wasn't, and this was not deliberate neglect on my mother's behalf. She did what she could. And, she was a fantastic parent to me and my younger brother when it was just the three of us, and she's still a fantastic parent. But because she would have to go to work, and there were a lot of times where it was just me and my brother at home. We didn't have we were able to indulge, so to speak, in, movies that we probably shouldn't have been watching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was it Nightmare on Elm Street one of them that traumatized you?
Oh my gosh, yes, Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah, I remember. It was a very indelible experience watching, and I don't remember exactly which in the series it was, but I do very clearly recall watching one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies as a kid and just not being able to sleep, not just that night, but for like nights afterwards. And just chewing myself out. Like, why are you subjecting yourself to this punishment? You can't sleep. This is not good. But inevitably, I would have another opportunity to watch another scary movie, or maybe another in the series, and I couldn't pass it up.
Once they hooked you in, right?
It did, and eventually I got desensitized, and they don't bother me nearly as much. And it's primarily pleasure that I derive from scary movies.
Now, do books in the horror genre have the same effect on you?
No, not really. Trying to think of the last scary piece of literature that really unnerved me. When I read scary literature, I don't really read it to be scared. I'm struggling to think of the last work of literature that really caused the hairs on my neck to stand on end. I hadn't really ever considered that. That's odd.
It's almost like a different experience, because a scary movie you're kind of expecting, but a novel is almost like, what would you say, is like just following a journey and just wanting to be taken along for the ride and not expecting to be horrified.
I wish I had something better to say about that, because I'm intrigued by that now. I need some time to think that over, but totally different. As I had mentioned before, I listened to an audiobook of Stephen King's latest, and my wife, she's not a fan of the genre, so she's been very limited in her exposure to horror, works of horror. But when she does occasionally watch a scary movie or read a scary story, she has a stronger reaction. It's easier for her to become scared. So the reason I bring that up is I can easily imagine her reading the Stephen King work and it really scaring her and unsettling her. But that was not at all the experience that I had listening to it. So, I don't know. Interesting.
Were you into celebrating Halloween?
Oh, yes. Actually, so ever since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, Halloween has been the big holiday, and it still is the big holiday. I've looked forward to Halloween more than Christmas.
Right with you.
Heck, maybe, love Halloween. And in fact, there's a story. I'll give you an abridged version, but there's a story that I share with my English students. So I teach high school English, and one of the activities that we do is the students, and this is a very common activity, a theme essay, but more specifically, a theme essay based on a personal experience. So what's something that happened to you that taught you an important life lesson? And as a bit of front loading to get the students to start thinking about, what they might want to write about,